let's bring in now our Wednesday political panel. This week it's Labor MP Daniel Molino and Liberal MP Garth Hamilton. Welcome to you both. Look, let's get the latest on the LA fires and talk about the lessons for Australia. There's been another round of Santa Ana winds. It's forecast to hit California. We're being told that they won't be as dangerous, though, as last week. But these catastrophic fires should serve as a warning to our own leaders here in Australia not to play progressive politics when it comes to fire protection. They need to focus on backburning and water supply. Daniel, what do you think we can learn from how California's leadership has prepared or not prepared for these fires?
Well, Shari, thanks for having me on. And I don't want to ruin this panel by starting with a contribution that I think Garth and I might agree on, at least in part. But Garth and I spent a lot of the last year on an inquiry which looked at flood insurance around Australia. And I actually think there are a lot of lessons that came out of that inquiry which point to some of the things that could have been done better in California. One of the lessons there was that in relation to floods, but also I think other natural disasters like fire, we need to spend more as a nation at federal and state level on mitigation and preparation. For decades, and this goes across all colours of government and levels of government, we've spent far more on cleaning up after messes and not enough on mitigation and preparation. And I think that partly goes to your point. So that's one of the issues. I think there's also a broader point around insurance. And one of the things that we found was that we need to have stronger protections for consumers. We need clearer insurance policies that have much clearer exclusions and better dispute resolution procedures. So I think there are things that Australia is already doing to prepare better. But of course, there's always more because we know there are going to be more of these disasters.
Yeah, I think those are really important points. But Garth, I want to pick up on this backburning issue because I know I get contacted a lot by farmers who are concerned that, you know, they've been called for certain areas to have backburning and it's just not done. Do you think that we do need to examine this more closely rather than wait for a national catastrophe?
Well, look, absolutely I do. Like many people in my community, I'm a member of my local rural fire brigade. Every situation where we come across a time where there's been a build-up of fuel load on the ground, we've known about it. The farmers have known about it, the locals have known about it. These local fire brigades are made up of those farmers. One of the things that Dan and I did come across, and I went over to the US and spoke with the Californian authorities over there, the more that we can empower local decision-making on the ground by these fire brigades, the better. These are the people who see what's going on. They understand what the cause of it is. And I do want to raise the issue, unfortunately it does come up quite often. It's about the management of our national parks. And sometimes we've been very reluctant to engage in backburning activities or good management of weed control in those parks, which leads to this build-up. Sadly, that's something that we saw in the US and we've seen it here in Australia as well.
Yeah, I think there probably should be a task force to look at preventative fire management because better than having a post-mortem, that's for sure. Now let's have a look at just how much the Albanese government is spending in marginal seats in a bid to win votes ahead of the next election. The Prime Minister is now being accused by the coalition of splashing cash in marginal seats. And even the Fin Review had an article recently where they basically said that the Albanese government promised to be on a spending diet, but instead has gone on a binge. That's in the Financial Review. Daniel, you know, so far we've got, among others, a $7.2 billion upgrade to the Bruce Highway in Queensland, $200 million for projects in regional areas of Western Australia. Then yesterday, $5 million for a riverfront precinct in the very marginal seat of Gilmore. So, you know, what's your response to these accusations?
Well, look, I'd take what the opposition says when it comes to spending with a bucket of salt, in that when we look at their time in government, like we've got two budgets in the bank now and they've both been surpluses. They had promises of being back in the black in coffee mugs and they got 0 out of 9. So let's take a step back and look at what each side of politics has actually delivered over the last decade when it comes to spending. I'd also say, look at the last term of government when it comes to the way in which they spent in in marginal electorates and used colour-coded spreadsheets. I think anything coming from the opposition is something that one has to
But
have
Daniel,
a very
surely
close look
that's
at.
not a strong
Let's look at the Bruce
political
Highway
argument to us to say that, oh, well, they did it, so we're going to do the same. I mean, we're in an inflation crisis at the moment where the RBA has all but said we shouldn't be having such high government spending.
So the RBA has said that our two surpluses help put downward pressure on inflation, and they have said that they don't think that government spending at the moment is one of the main reasons why inflation is sticky in the services sector. So they certainly haven't pointed to government spending as a major issue. But just finally, on this issue of the Bruce Highway, which is by far the biggest ticket item of the ones that you just pointed out. So we announced that it's a really important safety measure, really important for Queensland travellers and commuters. The opposition complained about it and complained about our spending, but then after many stakeholders and communities and Roads Australia welcomed it, they then 4 days or 5 days later backed it in. So where's the coherence, where's the credibility from the opposition on this?
My recollection, and I've quoted the statements on this show, is that the RBA has spoken about public spending and there have been warnings about homegrown inflation, but it's not for me to defend this, of course. Garth, what's your view? You know, we're not in the official campaign. Should we be seeing big spending commitments? And do you think the coalition also needs to refrain from making, you know, big cash splash announcements?
Well, look, let me start by saying I've got a lot of respect for Dan, and he knows that. But ask yourself, how many times did he have to point to the opposition or defer back to us when you ask him a question about Labor's spending? We've just gone through a term of government where Jim Chalmers has used the word restraint non-stop, talking about the restraint he's shown in his spending. And yet push comes to shove. When we get to the election period, out comes the money. It's being thrown around. The only thing they're throwing around more is insults at Peter Dutton. But there's another sort of issue that I think we can get to here. If we look at where Labor's having to go down the path of this big spending approach, it's because they don't have a mandate. They've got no message for the Australian people about what a second term of the Albanese government would look like. They're not telling us what they want to do, so they're having to rely upon buying votes in marginal seats. I think we'll see a lot more of it to come, probably a lot more insults at the opposition leader as well.